Well, good evening, everybody, and thank you for coming to the Courthouse Cultural Center this evening. For those of you who I don't know, my name is Nancy Turrell. I am the Executive Director of Martin Arts, which is the local arts agency for Martin County. Plus, we have a foundation that raises funds to support the arts in the community, which includes Women Supporting the Arts, and our capital campaign for the Old Stuart High School, which will become, at some point in time in the future, a vibrant arts center for the community. I'm very happy to have our panel members here with us today. I think we're going to have a lot of fun reliving some of the history that they lived. I came after all of this, so I'm excited to hear about it as well. So our panel members, I'm going to introduce them, but then I have a little bit of an abbreviated history I'm going to do, and then turn it over for them to start talking about what was happening here, well, in the mid-1980s or so, when things really started to get interesting. So to my immediate right, I have Joan Jefferson, who is... Thank you for being here. Joan served as mayor of the city of Stuart at the time things were happening here, and has done lots of things throughout the state of Florida in small towns and keeping main streets alive. So thank you for that. Street named after her. Exactly. For those of you who didn't hear it, she has a street named after her in Stuart. She was so valuable here and is still so. Mary Shaw is to Joan's right. Mary is my predecessor here as executive director, and I'm very happy to have you back here. Thank you, Mary.
Glad to be here.
And then Tom Prostopnik to the far right. Tom is an extremely active, dedicated volunteer and has been for a countless number of years.
Since
Can we just say that? Since the beginning of time, that is. But Tom is a retired high school teacher. He taught at both Martin County and South Fork, and is now an active artist and volunteer here, as he was while he was an active teacher. So he's always here, and we love that. So a quick history about this building to set the stage for the rest of the talk. All of these points are taken from a talk that Sandy Thurlow made in 1990 to the volunteers and docents here when we were just kicking things off. So the land that we are on here was part of the homestead of Reuben Russell Fraser, who was the head of the family for whom Fraser Creek was named. It was granted on April 10th, 1894, and at the time it was called Potsdam. It wasn't called Stuart then, and we were located in Dade County. In 1896, Fraser deeded the half acre of land to build a schoolhouse, and you're thinking schoolhouse, but this is the courthouse. Courthouse came later. The gift was stipulated that it be called the Belle Flora School after his daughters. The property was later added to by Mrs. Fraser, and the new school was built in 1908. Florida was growing like crazy in the early 1900s, and the school was busting at the seams. By 1922, it was finally determined that a new school would be built. The new school that they built was the building that stands at 500 Southeast Ocean Boulevard, which served as the Stuart High School. And it's more recently, since 1964, been the school district's administrative center until they moved out just a few years ago to the old Stuart News building on US 1. When the school vacated this property here, county officials moved in. And there is this from the wall just behind me forward was the addition that was built in 1937 as part of the courthouse. But there's the area just behind there that is actually still part of the older schoolhouse that stood behind here. Over time and through the Depression, financing was difficult. By 1936, with some county funds and $27,272 from the federal WPA program, they were able to remodel and improve, and that's when this part happened. Additional segments of the courthouse were added in 1947 and 1956, and for decades, the county made do with what they considered to be a decrepit structure, but it did not meet the needs of our community and was considered an embarrassment, which is how they started talking about needing a new courthouse. And this is where our panel comes in. In 1988, the courthouse, which is now located to our south and east, was built. The next step was a planned wrecking ball for this building. And our community heroes, some of whom are at this table today, were inspired by Andres Dewani to help save this building. And for the rest of the story, and because they were here and helped make it happen, I want them to take it from here. So I will start with Joan Jefferson. And you are the first slide, and I'm going to go behind the screen and move them forward.
Okay. This is the old schoolhouse. This was the original building. Next. And this is the 1937 courthouse. In 1984, the Department of Commission in Tallahassee told the county commission that their jail was no longer viable and that they either had to build a new jail or they had to correct the one that was here. And the county commission decided that they needed a new courthouse as well. And after much discussion, because Jim Holt, who was the sheriff, did not want the jail downtown because he didn't want it next to the middle school, they decided that they would go ahead and build the new courthouse downtown. At the next meeting, 19 members of the Stewart-Martin County Chamber of Commerce petitioned them to not do that. They said that, number one, the traffic would be too affected, and number two, that everything should be south in the middle of the county because that's where the population was. It's kind of like saying we should take the White House and put it in Iowa because that's the center of the county. Anyway, Chief White did a survey and found that it was perfectly viable to do the downtown additions. The merchants, of course, were very upset because they knew not only were they going to lose the Stewart News, which was going to move from East Ocean Boulevard to US 1, but if they lost the courthouse, they would also lose all of the architects and title companies and other businesses that needed access to the courthouse. So they got very active, and Gay Whiteside of Gay's Jewelry and Paul Herda of the Petite Cafe got them very activated, and they did petitions, they did rallies, they met one-on-one with the county commission. And then they asked everyone who wanted to support it to wear yellow ribbons when they came to the meeting. And at one point, they actually bought a coffin and showed it to them and said that if they didn't vote for the county being here, then in fact the whole downtown would die. The concern at the county at that point was that they didn't have enough land for the county courthouse to be built as it was designed. So they went back to the city, and the city agreed that one, they would take 25% of the cost of moving the ball fields to the YMCA facility, and they would also move the city garage, if that was necessary, to the school board garage. So with that in hand, the county commission decided once again they would build the courthouse downtown. It was a 4-1 vote against, and Maggie voted against it again. Next slide. In 1988, Dan Carey, who was the director of the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council, and he met Andres Dewani and thought he walked on water. And he came to the council and said that we had to approve a new community in Hobe Sound that Dewani was going to develop. And all of us who had distressed downtowns were not excited. And we said, if this guy is so good, why can't he do something in an existing downtown? And Dewani said, absolutely not. But Dan Carey said he had to, and he gave him $25,000. And Dewani came, and his team came. They spoke to everybody in the community. They looked at every document. Next slide. And then they made their final presentation at the Lyric Theater. The Lyric Theater at that time was full of holes and leaky. And so he had to stand with an umbrella over his slide projector to show the program, and 200 of us had to find a dry seat. He insulted everybody in the community, criticized everybody in the community, and at the end of the event, we all stood up, gave him a standing ovation. We all walked over to City Hall and accepted his plan. So the first thing that he wanted to do was to save the old courthouse, and you can imagine how that went over. I think it was Judge Sienka said it was moth-ridden and full of cockroaches and it should be torn down, and then there were all these letters. Anyway, 22 of the 23 architects in town decided that the building should be saved, and the only architect that didn't agree was Phil Braden. So the first thing they did is, next slide, the first thing they did is that they went inside and looked at the building to see if it was available, and they found there was no asbestos inside, and it had concrete columns, and it was a very sound building, and they thought it could be done with not a lot of money. And they suggested to the county that they apply for a historic preservation grant. The next thing they did is nobody knew what they were talking about saving, so the architects painted red lines to show the area that was going to be saved. The county did get the $200,000 CDBG grant, historic preservation grant, but they really weren't interested and they didn't know what to do with the building. So after much discussion, they talked about doing a cultural arts building here. And the county decided to give a 15-year lease to the city. And the city would administer the grant, they would operate, and they would maintain the building. The first thing that had to be done was to do the architectural drawings, which Peter Jefferson donated to the community, and he came in with Ada Fry. Ada Fry had helped him with the colors. So that was done, and the next thing we knew is that next slide. Is that the courthouse? The Cultural Arts Center? Okay. That we had the Cultural Arts Center. Now, part of Dwani's plan was not only the courthouse, but he wanted to take Memorial Park and carry it through the buildings onto the other side. And so the first thing, next slide, he told us that our bandstand looked like a urinal and that we needed to have a new bandstand, and he wanted, next slide, to design a gazebo, which Peter again designed. And then Peter found out that the architects were very angry at him because he got all the free work. This turned out to be an absolutely wonderful thing. The Kiwanis Club sponsored music in the park at lunch, and you could get your lunch from Idlewise or one of the restaurants, or simply bring your own. Get there with a blanket or a chair and listen to this wonderful music at lunchtime. This was really, really a community project. This would not have happened just with politicians. We had free work from architects, from engineers, from grants writers. Everybody supported this and made a wonderful amenity that then, and it is now a wonderful amenity. Thank you.
Terrific. So you, as mayor, you played a pretty important role in getting the city to agree to do that, correct?
I did, but I have to tell you, I was not excited. My husband was very excited. He never petitioned anything, never said anything to me, but I would go to sleep and he'd be saying, "Save the courthouse." So I helped.
It helped. It helped.
Can I just ask a quick question? In
Oh.
that other picture, now I just want to know, was part of the building cut off?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, yes.
It looked like it was much larger. Okay, that's all.
Yeah, and I would like to keep questions and answers because of the microphones and MCTV, our wonderful taping of this, because the people on the, when we show the recording, they won't be able to hear all the questions. So enter Mary Shaw, and at the time, it was Martin County Council for the Arts.
It was, and we were very fortunate, which I found out how fortunate later when I tried to help other small communities start an arts council, in that we were really founded by the Business Development Board. That was important because it meant that we had business behind us right from day one, and the top leaders, Jack Valenti from, Bill Valenti from one of the biggest banks that's no longer here, and Peter Cummings and Erling Spear. All of those are names that you probably remember as having a great deal to do with the development of this community, and they knew that we had to have the arts if we were going to grow into the kind of community that they foresaw. They also were very influential with county government. And so when it came time to tear the old courthouse down to build the new one, and it was generally agreed that it was a very ugly building. But that's because people can't see except what's right in front of them. They couldn't see the possibilities. So Demeter Stoyanov and Peter Jefferson decided that one way to bring the community into this was about our first or second Arts Fest. We got the county to agree to let us paint on the building because they were going to come in and tear it down at that point. And so we put up scaffolds, and we had buckets of paint out, and we told people that they could just come and during Arts Fest paint on the building. You remember that, Tom? Did you paint?
I'm going to add to that.
Okay. You're going to add about Ida, aren't you? Okay, I'll let you have that. Let's see. It was a beautiful day. I mean, we had young people up there on the scaffolds. We had people, Ida Fry, he'll tell you about what she did. Julia Kelly painted a most gorgeous swan, and we didn't get any pictures of any of that. I don't think there's a single one around. Do you, Tom?
I don't have any.
Part of the reason is what he's going to talk about. It didn't stay up there very long, but it got the community interested. It got them talking about it. And right after that, we organized an assault, not physical, but on the county commission when it was coming up. And we called people and we sent out word. We didn't have email and Facebook and all of those things then. But I don't know how many, but there were hundreds, at least, of people that came to the county commission meeting, more than could be seated. They were out in the hall. And we gave them big name tags to wear about saving it. And at that time, the Business Development Board, who was housing the Arts Council, had agreed with us that if they would save the building, we would run it. So that was one problem solved. Who was going to, nobody wanted to run it. So we said, well, I guess that's something that we could do. And it gave us a home as well. So I remember walking around the building with Peter and looking at the light fixtures and seeing what we could do to keep the same period. One thing Joan didn't say, which I have always heard and I think is true, is that this building that stands now was actually a WPA project.
I believe that to be true from what I've read.
And so that's why the terrazzo and everything is so beautifully done. And there were also stories of when it was a courthouse. We have a hole in the stairs as you go out, and that was a gunfight after a courtroom, and somebody was shooting into the steps. So people loved all the old stories, and then Peter could see the possibilities, and then he got Demeter. And if any of you knew Demeter Stoyanov, he was a flamboyant architect that loved to take nothing and make it into something. So he decided that his part in this role was going to be to make this into a space that the arts truly could use. Peter made it into a historic restoration, and Demeter made it into an art gallery. And at any rate, the county commissioners were just overwhelmed with the response, and they agreed that if the city would take responsibility and if the Arts Council would move in and run it, that they would not tear this building down, but they would not spend any money on it either. So that's about where we came in, and our first exhibit, appropriately, was Stewart Heritage, I believe, and Sandy Thurlow pictures all over the place, and then we had several artist groups in Martin County at that time, and we featured them, and this was when we had windows everywhere. So there was really not much wall space, really. When you go out today, look from the outside in and see how many windows there are out there. And when Mitsubishi came in and wanted to do development in Martin County, they had bought the rights to one of 3 collections of original Ansel Adams photographs. And it was eventually going to be housed in a building they were building in Los Angeles, but it was slated to go to 5 cities in the United States before it went there. It started in Tokyo, and then it was coming to the United States. Anyway, we talked the Mitsubishi people into bringing that collection to the Courthouse Cultural Center, having no idea what we were getting into. And they agreed to do it. So here, Stewart was on this list of places that it could be seen in the United States. And the others were Houston and New York and Los Angeles and Chicago and Stewart. First National Bank, as it was known then, decided to give us money to do a lot of the things we needed to do it. And Mitsubishi agreed to pay for the upgrades to lighting and putting in the walls, and air conditioning had to be upgraded for this type of artwork, and they agreed to pay for all of that. So First National underwrote the exhibit. Mitsubishi paid for all the structural, and they have a little tiny plaque on the
still
safe.
here.
That's what they got out of it. They didn't get their development.
They did not.
They got a little plaque on the safe.
I believe that land remains undeveloped to today.
And when it opened, a good number of the executives from the Mitsubishi Corporation came to Stewart for the opening. And we had a dinner the night before, and what they wanted to do was karaoke, because the Japanese love karaoke. And they gave gifts to us, and we had been told that we needed to have gifts for them because that's the Japanese way. I still have my little fan that I got. We had such crowds coming through this that we had to develop a way of, First National gave us those stanchions, and which you probably still
We
have.
still have. We don't throw anything
so
away
that
around here.
we could guide people in. And so they would come in the front door, and it was like going to IKEA. You had to go a certain way until you went out, and there was no deviating from that. But we didn't rush people, but we also didn't let them sit down. And we had lines all the way to Edelweiss and beyond down the street. And we're giving people half-hour times that they could come in. And we had, in the meantime, gotten volunteers to agree to open like a sales place where we sold Ansel Adams calendars and posters and books and postcards. And we made, I don't know if you have any records of how much we made, but we made quite a bit of money, which at that time was very important because we didn't have any during that exhibit. And the whole community became aware of the power of the arts. I don't know what else to say. It just immediately captured the imagination of the artist in town, of the business community. We were able to later on have wonderful exhibits from Tampa, and then we became part of the South Florida Cultural Consortium. And so Palm Beach and Broward County and Miami-Dade were giving us artist names that would be good to exhibit here. But it was Mitsubishi that really put our names on the board, I think.
Absolutely. I mean, to this day, that's still the largest attended exhibit that's happened here. But, you know, by rights, Ansel Adams is the biggest name we've ever had in the gallery space. So, I mean, that all makes sense. And, you know, the partnership with the South Florida Cultural Consortium is something that continues on through today. I think it's one of the longest running partnerships of that regional nature anywhere. So it's really a strong and important core piece of who we are.
We, in the early years, used the whole building. We didn't have any staff, so we didn't need offices much. So the upstairs rooms were used by IRCC to host classes. We had classes in opera. We partnered with the Opera Society in Fort Pierce, and some of their people would come in and hold classes about the operas they were going to show that year. We had literature classes that Jane Miller, many of you know Jane, taught here, and other, I think at one time we had pottery classes too.
They have.
But at any rate, the upstairs was just as busy as the downstairs. And some of the things on the staircase were given to us by local artists, and the pictures by Sandy Thurlow to put up there.
Yeah, if you take a walk up to the landing, there are pictures that show the history, and there's some historical notes in the little program that we prepared too that talk about Dr. Wubenhorst, who is the sculptor who made those Indian heads that are on the stairwell. Tom, you want to talk a little bit about the artist community and the
let's
school
talk.
and the art teachers?
This
And
thing keeps booming at me or something. I want to go back a little bit further. At the time, there were all these art organizations, Hope Sound Art League, Jensen Beach Art League, Art Associates of Martin County. We had drama classes, dance, music, and everybody was doing their own thing. And a group got together and said we ought to form what we call an umbrella organization, where all these people could get together and be one organization and all coordinate, so we'll all know what we're doing. We can make schedules and everything else that went along with it. This was the organization we called the Arts Foundation, and I was on the board of directors, one of the original members. The big problem was we had artists, we had singers, we had drama people, we had musicians, but we didn't have any bankers and we didn't have any businessmen. So artists are generally non-joiners, and they're generally not very well organized. So we kind of foundered for a couple of years, and then we had some internal problems, and finally we said this is not working, and we dissolved, and then we came back the next day and called ourselves the Martin County Council of the Arts. So that was the beginning, and we removed a few people from the board, and that was basically the beginning of the Martin County Council of the Arts. And again, we didn't have a place. This building came shortly after that. We used to meet in the Methodist Church out on Canner Highway. That was where our original meeting place was. Then once we got the okay to take over this building, as you saw one of the pictures, as this building stands, it was extended this way and extended that way, and it was kind of like an octopus. I remember coming in here when it was a courthouse. You'd have to walk up some stairs and go to another room and walk up 3 stairs to get to another level, and there were so many different levels here. And when they decided that they were going to finally create this cultural courthouse, and we had to get rid of the 2 wings that were on either side, and as Mary said, they allowed us to paint. So we went to all the different paint stores in town and got all their volunteered cans of paint, and I was a teacher at South Fork High School at the time, and we got all the artists in town and anybody else who was interested to come, and they said, just paint whatever you want on the buildings, anything goes. So I talked to my colleague at the time, Tom Wetzel, and I said, why don't we paint a huge Mona Lisa, big, great big, and they offered us a scissors forklift so we could get 15 feet up in the air, And he said, why don't we paint self-portraits instead? And vanity, I say, yeah, that's great. Let's do that. So I went through I got a picture of myself and blocked it out, you know how artists will grid the thing. And then I made a big template, and I went to my friend Tom and said, okay, we're going to do it. You all ready? He said, no, I changed my mind. I'm not going to do it. And I had nothing prepared for Mona Lisa. The only thing I had was for this mug. So I said, all right, I'll do it. So I got on the scissor lift and put my portrait up on the building that is no longer here. And that was up there for about a year before they finally tore the building down. I'm sure everybody looked at it and wondered who and why, but one of my students did get up on the scissor lift with me, Angel Longoria, and he did some big paintings up there as well. So it was, most of them were kind of on this level as far as you could reach, or with a little scaffolding, but we were way up high. And Mary mentioned Ida Fry. Those of you that know her, she does exquisite work. And she did a lot of paintings on the front of the building, and some of them were very tastefully done nudes. And some of the town folks, regardless of how tastefully they were done, they were still nudes. So there were several complaints. I guess some of the people on a Sunday morning would stop on East Ocean Boulevard and count and look, and then they'd be on their way. And instead of just saying, beautiful artwork, thank you, they said, oh, that's obscene. So,
And this was still being used as a courthouse at that time, so people coming into court had to walk past. It was the door frame, and they were angels all the way.
angels in the architecture, spinning in infinity. So white paint came out, and it was painted over.
Almost immediately, and we
Almost.
didn't know it was going to happen either. So,
No, so
we
there's
went
no
home
record
one
of it.
night and came back the next day, and it was all gone. It was
Right.
white,
That
and
was,
so no pictures were
No.
taken
And
that I know of.
as they said, the first, I believe the first exhibit we had in here, when there were, imagine windows all the way around, and the artwork was up on easels, except for this wall, and I'm not even sure if this partition was here. I brought in you have some of those.
They are passing around.
There's some
They are
pictures, you can
floating around.
look at those from the first exhibit. They selected, I think, about 10 artists from the community, and we were able to put our artwork up in the first exhibit. When Ansel Adams came in, one of the things they were concerned about was security. So when our work was here, I don't believe we had these doors. There wasn't an alarm system, and there wasn't any kind of a locking system, so artwork was exposed. But that was the first, to my remembrance, of the first exhibit that was in here. And again, you can read the list of the artists. I'm not sure who's still in the area besides Ida Fry.
You and Ida, I think.
They've all moved out or moved on. So,
In one way or another, right?
and that's my early remembrance, and I've been with the Cultural Courthouse ever since as a volunteer. I'm on the gallery committee right now. We make the selections as to what is being exhibited here. I'm up on the ladder fixing the lights for almost every exhibit, except for the one that Jennifer helps me with.
That's right.
And
While you're talking about the exhibit, why don't you talk just a little bit about the history of what's on the walls right now, which is the 36th annual high school juried art show that was.
okay, when we were remembering back, things make me laugh. When I was on the board of directors, our main goal was to raise $3 million. I guess they were going to have a bake sale or something. So we were able to get grants and everything else. We had $10,000 in our treasury, working towards $3 million. And I said, what we have to do is to hire a fundraiser. They'll the professional fundraiser, they will get us the money, they will take their percentage. And nobody agreed with me. They said, no, we can't afford $10,000. That's in the kitty now. We got to keep adding to that. So we never got a fundraiser. We just kept that $10,000 and kept adding to it $100 a year or whatever. But one of the things that I did create was the scholarship. At the time, Martin County High School was the only high school, and I said we need to give a scholarship for the best art student for the year, and everybody agreed with me with that one. And I think we had something like it was a $500 award, and so we did that for, I don't know, 2 or 3 or 4 years, and then and it was probably less than that, maybe 2 years. And then South Fork High School came into being, and I said, well, now we have a second high school, so we'll have to have a second scholarship. And the board said, okay, well, we'll split it, $250 for each school. I said, no, it's going to be $500 for each school. And they said, yeah, but our treasury, So I did get my way. We did have 2 scholarships the first year or 2. I can't remember how long that was. And Marvin Cohn was on one of the members of the board, and he was an educator. He had a private school in Miami, a very high-end school right on Biscayne Bay, and he sold that. And right now, I believe there are condominiums there made. He had a fantastic art collection. He was very knowledgeable, and so he moved to Martin County from Miami. And he came up with the idea of, instead of having 2 scholarships, awarding 2 students a year, why not have an art show, and we could award many, in this case, 62 or 46 or whatever.
Yeah, I think there's about 60
So-
artists, Jennifer, and we gave out how much in awards?
So
1,500?
so this is why we call it the Marvin Cohn Student Art Show, because he is the one that suggested, instead of 2 scholarships, that we go to a complete show. So I give full credit to Marvin for having the foresight to see that what we really needed. And I've been with it ever since. The very first Best of Show was Tony DiTerlizzi. Those of you who have been around long enough to know Tony, I was wearing one of his shirts earlier. He is right now, he was the first Best of Show. Before we had this building, it was over at the round bank building that's over in Jensen Beach. That was where we had the first 1 or 2 student exhibits. And Tony now is a major artist, illustrator, book writer. He won the Caldecott Award a few years ago. He's done work with George Lucas. He's had a movie produced in Hollywood. So I can't say enough about Tony. He was my student in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. We both went to the South Fork High School at the same time, and I was a student, his teacher for 4 years, on and off at South Fork. So we're still good friends and talk to each other regularly. And that's the student show.
Yeah,
One thing I've always liked about the student show, and I don't think it is any different this year, you can see in the artwork each year the what the students are thinking about. And the tone. One year, and this was soon after 9/11, the artwork was so dark and had a lot of violence in it. Other years, it's been light and themes that showed optimism and hope. And this year, I haven't looked at it real carefully yet, but it seems to me that they are going about their business, doing the things that make them happy in a way that makes them happy. There's a lot of different types of art.
Right. Last year, there were several paintings and drawings, everybody wearing a mask. And I don't know if there's any this year.
There's one over in that back corner
Is
there with masks.
I just have
know.
always loved
Okay.
the high school juried art
Yeah.
show. It's one of
But
my
There's
favorites.
an article, newspaper article from that show that Tom was talking about, the first one on the wall right over here. So when you leave today, you can take a look at that, and it does show that history. We put it out every year with a picture of Mr. Cohn so that we honor his legacy and memory. Working backwards, Tom, I'm going to start with you in terms of, so it mattered to save it then, and it mattered to have the arts here. How does it still matter today?
This is the center of the arts in Martin County. I know we still have gallery down the street and one down the street this way. We had one downtown that closed, but this is enduring. This is going to be here. This is where it's all about until we move to the new building, and then this will, I think, will still continue to be an art facility of some kind. So it's the center of arts in Martin County, and not only that, but I live in Port St. Lucie, which is St. Lucie County. I spend all my time here. We have people from North Palm Beach County that come here, and Okeechobee. So it is becoming a center, art center.
Mary?
I would agree with that. And that was part of our argument in saving it, was that we needed a face for the arts. And we needed a face for the arts in the downtown. And so this will always be in the downtown, and it will serve a purpose. We'll just have to think real hard what the new purpose will be once we lay out what the purpose of the next step is.
Absolutely.
You can never give away your history. This is said from a gal that grew up in Virginia, and let me tell you, they made sure we knew our history growing up. But I came to Florida, and my first thought was, is there any history here? And then somebody gave me a 2-volume book about Flagler. I had never heard of Henry Flagler. And didn't know who he was. And that still amazes me that the rest of the country has no idea who Henry Flagler was. But I soon found that Florida has a very rich history. Martin County has a very rich history. And it's imperative that we save it.
Absolutely. And Joan?
Well, saving the building was obviously very important, still is. But I think that what else happened is that for the first time we did have a cultural arts building. And that was a different feeling for our community that we had prior to that. So I think it all worked together to help all of us, even now.
It was sort of an evolution and maturation of the community, wasn't it?
Agreed.
That's certainly what the Business Development Board thought then, and they still are very, all of the businesses in Martin County are very supportive of everything. I mean, where else do you know a county the size of this that has an orchestra as fine as the Atlantic Classical Orchestra? And there are many other examples of that in this community that we can all just be so proud of. But it had to start somewhere. It had to start with people that did that old Arts Foundation, many of whom later stayed involved in the Arts Council.
Absolutely. Well, so I have one random question. I was at an Economic Council Business Development Board event last night, and Jenny Yingling asked me that she said there was a basement. Was there a basement when you were walking around the building? I've never seen any evidence that there was a way down. Do you recall before? No. I don't either.
No.
There's something on the plans that show that.
Right, I didn't think so.
But one of the big controversies, talk about the wings and so forth, was in saving the building. There was a piece of the old schoolhouse still here that was attached at the back. And it was very difficult, especially for Peter, I think, to say that it couldn't stay because we all felt so much about the history, but it was just in terrible shape, and the county didn't want it intruding on their building, but it was more the condition that it was in. But we do have some, and we left open in the bathroom. some of the exposed walls from that building in the original building. So we have a little piece of the original building, which nobody knows is there, but it used to be a men's bathroom, but I think it's a unisex now, so any of you can go in.
It is, which speaks to some of the changes over the years, and I won't belabor this. We'll go to Q&A here in a second. But not using the second floor anymore for public programming has everything to do with the changes in the American Disabilities Act. And there are only stairs to get up to the second floor, and so there is no public programming that happens on the second floor any longer, because if you can't climb stairs, you can't get to it. So it's our offices, and we do have meeting space up there, but it's sort of eliminated that element of what kept it a little bit more active, perhaps, in the earlier days. But it's still a pretty active space. And we are just, this concept of supporting young people, giving them this opportunity for this show is something that we think about and work on all year long, because that really is planning for the next generations is a big part of what we do, and keeping the arts alive.
If you haven't been to the Martys, they showcase the youth in so beautifully there. Beautiful job done there.
Thank you. That'll be this fall. Nominations have just about closed. We're looking for a couple adult literary artists before we close out all of it. But Crystal Wyon Eckhart, who's a retired Martin County drama teacher, will be producing the show this year. We'll have student mashups like we have in the past and feature some of our former award recipients. It'll be fun over at the Lyric Theater. So with no further ado, we are going to close the MCTV portion of the program and then open it up to the audience for any questions and answers.